Welcome back. In the previous lesson, we learned how to create a database, create tables, and retrieve data using the select statement. But here's an important question. What if your table contains 10 rows? Retrieving all the data is easy. But what if your table contains 10,000 rows, or even 1 million rows? Do you still want to see every single record? Probably not. Most of the time, you're looking for something very specific. Maybe you want to see only employees from the IT department. Or perhaps you need employees whose salary is greater than 50,000. Maybe you want to find only active customers, pending orders, or products that are out of stock. This is exactly where the where clause becomes one of the most powerful features in SQL. Instead of displaying everything, the where clause helps us retrieve only the records that match our condition. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to filter data like a professional SQL developer. We'll understand what the where clause is, how it works, and when to use it. You'll also learn comparison operators such as equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. Then we'll combine multiple conditions using and or, and finally apply everything using practical, real-world examples. By the end of this lesson, you'll know how to retrieve exactly the data you need, instead of searching through thousands of records. So let's get started. What if your table has 1 million records? Give learners a few seconds to think. Then continue with, that's the problem SQL is designed to solve. We don't search manually, we ask SQL Server to find the data for us. This creates curiosity before introducing the where clause. Key message. The goal of this lesson isn't to retrieve more data, it's to retrieve the right data. This single idea is the foundation of the entire lesson and prepares learners for the upcoming slides on filtering and conditions. Before we learn the where clause, let's first understand the problem it solves. Imagine you work for a large company. The company's employees table doesn't contain 10 or 20 records. It contains thousands, or even millions of employee records. Now suppose your manager asks you, show me only the employees who work in the IT department. If you retrieve every record from the table, you'll have to search through thousands of rows just to find a few matching employees. That would be slow, confusing, and completely unnecessary. This is exactly the problem shown on this slide. On the left, you can see a huge employees table filled with thousands of records. On the right, you can see someone wondering, do I really need to look at all 1 million records? The answer is no. We only need the records that match our requirement. That's where the where clause comes to the rescue. Think of the where clause like a smart filter. Just like you use filters while shopping online to find products by price, brand, or rating, SQL Server uses the where clause to filter database records. Instead of returning every row, SQL Server returns only the rows that satisfy the condition we specify. As shown at the bottom of the slide, the huge table is filtered into a much smaller result containing only the required records. This makes our queries faster, our results easier to understand, and our applications much more efficient. So remember this important idea. The goal isn't to retrieve all the data. The goal is to retrieve the right data. Do we really need all 1 million records? Wait for students to answer. Then say, no, we only need the records that match our requirement. This creates a natural transition into introducing the where clause. Real-world analogy. Imagine you're searching for a red shirt on an online shopping website. The website may have 100,000 products, but you don't want to see everything. You simply apply filters like color equals red, size equals medium, and price 1,000. Immediately, only the products matching those conditions are displayed. The where clause works in exactly the same way inside a database. Key points to emphasize. Large databases can contain thousands or millions of records. Retrieving all records is usually unnecessary. The where clause acts like a filter. It returns only the rows that satisfy a condition. Filtering data improves readability, efficiency, and performance. Professional SQL developers focus on retrieving the right data, not all the data. Golden rule. Don't search through all the data. Let SQL Server filter it for you using the where clause. Now that we understand why filtering is important, let's learn the SQL command that makes it possible. This command is called the where clause. The where clause is used to retrieve only those records that satisfy a specific condition. In simple words, it acts like a filter. Imagine you have a basket full of different fruits, but today you only want apples. Instead of taking every fruit, you simply choose the apples and leave the rest behind. That's exactly how the where clause works in SQL Server. It filters the data and returns only the rows that match the condition we specify. Now let's look at the syntax. First, we write the select statement to specify which columns we want. Then we write the from clause to specify the table. Finally, we add the where clause followed by a condition. In this example, the condition is department equals it. This tells SQL Server, return only those employees whose department is it. SQL Server checks every row in the employees table. If the department is IT, that row is included in the result. If the department is anything else, such as HR, finance, or sales, SQL Server simply ignores that row. The result is a much smaller data set, containing only the employees we actually need. This makes our queries faster, easier to read, and much more useful in real-world applications. Select column 1, column 2. From table name. Where condition. Select right arrow, what information do you want? From right arrow, which table should SQL Server read? Where right arrow, which rows should SQL Server return? Select empid, name, department. From employees. Where department equals it. Will employees from the HR department appear in the result? No, because only rows where the department is it satisfy the condition. Real-world analogy. Imagine you're searching for flights on a travel website. Thousands of flights are available. But after selecting from Chennai to Dubai and date, Monday, the website shows only the flights that match your choices. The website is filtering data for you. The where clause does exactly the same thing inside a database. Key points to emphasize. The where clause filters rows, not columns. It is always followed by a condition. SQL Server evaluates the condition for every row. Matching rows are returned. Non-matching rows are ignored. The result contains only the information you need. Golden rule. Where it doesn't change your data, it simply chooses which rows to display. Now that we know what the where clause is, let's understand what actually happens behind the scenes when SQL Server executes a query. Many beginners think SQL Server somehow jumps directly to the correct records. But that's not how it works. SQL Server follows a simple process. First, it reads the rows from the table. Then for each row, it checks whether the condition in the where clause is true or false. If the condition is true, SQL Server keeps that row. If the condition is false, SQL Server skips that row. Let's look at the example on this slide. We have an employees table containing employees from different departments. Our query is, select empid, name, department. From employees. Where department equals it. SQL Server starts with the first employee. The first employee belongs to the IT department. The condition is true, so this row is included in the result. Next, SQL Server checks the second employee. This employee belongs to the finance department. Since the department is not it, the condition is false. SQL Server ignores that row. Then it continues checking the third employee. Again, the department is IT, so SQL Server includes that row. It repeats this process for every row in the table until it reaches the end. Finally, SQL Server returns only the rows where the department is it. This is why the where clause is called a filter. It doesn't change the data. It simply decides which rows should appear in the result. Read the row. Check the condition. Condition is true, include the row. Condition is false, skip the row. Repeat until all rows are checked. Does SQL Server stop after finding the first IT employee? No, SQL Server continues checking every row because there may be many employees who satisfy the condition. Real-world analogy. Imagine a security guard checking people at the entrance of a company. The rule is simple. Allow only employees with a valid ID card. The guard checks every person one by one. If the person has a valid ID, they're allowed to enter. If not, they're stopped. The guard doesn't change the people, he simply decides who can pass. The where clause works exactly the same way. It checks every row and returns only those that satisfy the condition. Key points to emphasize. SQL Server evaluates the where condition row by row. Each row is tested independently. If the condition is true, the row is returned. If the condition is false, the row is skipped. The original table remains unchanged. The where clause only filters the result, not the stored data. Golden rule. Think of the where clause as a decision maker. It checks every row and keeps only the rows that match your condition. Now that we understand how the where clause works, let's learn something even more powerful. The where clause becomes truly useful when we combine it with comparison operators. Comparison operators allow us to compare values and decide which records should be returned. Think of them as the rules that SQL Server uses to make decisions. Let's look at each operator one by one. The first operator is the equal to operator, represented by the equal sign equals. It returns only the records where the value exactly matches the condition. For example, salary equals 55,000. SQL Server returns only employees whose salary is exactly 55,000. Next is the not equal to operator, written as less than followed by greater than. This returns every record except the one that matches the specified value. For example, salary 50,000. SQL Server returns all employees whose salary is not 50,000. The next operator is greater than. This returns values larger than the specified number. For example, salary 50,000. Only employees earning more than 50,000 are displayed. Similarly, less than, it returns values smaller than the specified number. Then we have greater than or equal to greater or equal. This includes values that are either greater than the specified number or exactly equal to it. Finally, less than or equal to less or equal returns values that are either less than the specified number or exactly equal to it. As you can see from the examples on this slide, simply changing the comparison operator changes the result completely. Although the query structure remains the same, the condition determines which records SQL Server returns. These comparison operators are used every day by SQL developers to search, filter, and analyze data efficiently. Operator asks students, equals, what do you think this means? How can we find records that are not equal? Which salaries will be returned? Which values are smaller? Greater or equal, does this include the exact value too? Less or equal, will SQL Server include equal values? Real-world analogy. Imagine a company hiring employees. The job advertisement says, age equals 21. This means candidates who are 21 years old or older can apply. Anyone younger than 21 is not eligible. Similarly, if the condition were age 21, only candidates younger than 21 would be selected. SQL Server uses comparison operators in exactly the same way. It compares values and decides which records satisfy the condition. Key points to emphasize. Comparison operators are used inside the where clause. They compare one value with another. Different operators produce different results. Equals means exactly equal, means not equal, and compare larger and smaller values. Greater or equal and less or equal include the specified value as well. Choosing the correct operator is just as important as writing the correct query. Golden rule. The where clause asks the question, and the comparison operator defines the rule for answering it. So far, we've learned how to filter data using a single condition. But in real-world applications, one condition is often not enough. Sometimes we need to apply multiple conditions at the same time. That's where the AND operator comes in. The AND operator combines two or more conditions. A row is returned only if every condition is true. If even one condition is false, SQL Server excludes that row from the result. Let's look at the example. Our query says, where department equals it and salary 60,000. This means an employee must satisfy both conditions. First, the employee must belong to the IT department. Second, the employee's salary must be greater than 60,000. Now let's see how SQL Server processes this query. SQL Server checks the first condition. Is the employee in the IT department? If the answer is no, SQL Server immediately skips that row. If the answer is yes, SQL Server moves to the second condition. It then checks whether the salary is greater than 60,000. Only if both answers are yes does SQL Server include that employee in the final result. That's why the result contains only employees who satisfy every condition. You can think of the AND operator as making your search more precise. Instead of finding all IT employees, it finds only IT employees whose salary is above 60,000. This helps us retrieve exactly the information we need. Select EmpID, name, department, salary. From employees, where department equals it, and salary 60,000. Explain it one condition at a time. Condition 1, department must be it. Condition 2, salary must be greater than 60,000. What happens if an employee works in IT but earns only 55,000? That employee will not appear in the result because only one condition is true. The AND operator requires both conditions to be true. Real-world analogy. Imagine you're applying for a job. The company has two requirements. You must have a bachelor's degree. You must have at least 2 years of experience. If you meet only one requirement, you don't qualify. You must satisfy both requirements. The AND operator works exactly the same way in SQL. Key points to emphasize. AND combines two or more conditions. Every condition must evaluate to true. If any condition is false, the row is excluded. AND produces more specific and precise results. It's commonly used to narrow down large data sets. Golden rule. With AND, every condition matters. One false condition is enough to exclude the row. In the previous slide, we learned about the AND operator. We discovered that AND returns a row only when all conditions are true. Now let's learn another very useful operator called OR. The OR operator works differently. With OR, a row is returned if at least one condition is true. In other words, the record doesn't have to satisfy every condition. Satisfying just one condition is enough. Let's look at the example. Our query says, where department equals it or department equals HR. What does this mean? It means SQL Server should return employees who work in the IT department or employees who work in the HR department. If an employee belongs to it, the row is selected. If another employee belongs to HR, that row is also selected. Any employee who belongs to finance or another department will not appear because neither condition is true. Notice the difference between AND and OR. The AND operator makes your search more specific by reducing the number of results. The OR operator makes your search broader by including records that satisfy either condition. You can think of OR as giving SQL Server multiple acceptable choices. If the row matches condition 1, it is returned. If it matches condition 2, it is also returned. If it matches both conditions, it is still returned only once. This makes the OR operator very useful whenever you want to search for multiple possible values in a single query. Select EmpID, name, department. From employees, where department equals it, or department equals HR. Condition 1, right arrow department equals it. Condition 2, right arrow department equals HR. If an employee belongs to the HR department, will the row be returned? Yes, because the employee satisfies one of the conditions, and with OR, one matching condition is enough. What about an employee from the finance department? The row will not be returned because it satisfies neither condition. Real-world analogy. Imagine you're buying a movie ticket. The offer says, students or senior citizens receive a discount. If you're a student, you get the discount. If you're a senior citizen, you also get the discount. You don't have to be both. Meeting either one of the conditions is enough. That's exactly how the OR operator works in SQL. Key points to emphasize. OR combines two or more conditions. A row is returned if at least one condition is true. OR produces broader results than AND. It is useful when searching for multiple possible values. If none of the conditions are true, the row is excluded. OR helps retrieve records that match any of the specified conditions. Golden rule. Use OR when any one of your conditions is enough to qualify the row. Before we complete this lesson, let's quickly compare the AND and OR operators. Both operators are used with the where clause. Both allow us to combine multiple conditions, but they behave very differently. Let's start with the AND operator. The AND operator returns a row only when every condition is true. If even one condition is false, SQL Server excludes that row from the result. This means AND gives us more specific and narrower results. Now let's look at the OR operator. The OR operator is more flexible. It returns a row if at least one condition is true. A row doesn't need to satisfy every condition. Matching just one condition is enough. As a result, OR usually returns more records than AND. Let's compare the two examples shown on this slide. In the first query, we use department equals it and salary 60,000. Only employees who satisfy both conditions appear in the result. In the second query, we use department equals it or department equals HR. Now SQL Server returns employees from either department, so the result contains many more records. So here's an easy way to remember the difference. AND narrows your search, or broadens your search. As a SQL developer, choosing the correct operator is important because it directly affects the results returned by your query. Understanding this difference will help you write accurate, efficient, and professional SQL queries. OR usually returns more rows because satisfying just one condition is enough. Real-world analogy. Imagine you're applying for a university scholarship. One scholarship says, score above 90% and annual family income below 3 lakhs. You must satisfy both conditions. Another scholarship says, sports quota or cultural quota. Meeting either one of those conditions is enough. That's exactly the difference between AND and OR in SQL. Key points to emphasize. AND OR. All conditions must be true, at least one condition must be true. Produces narrower results, produces broader results. Returns fewer records, usually returns more records. Used for precise filtering, used for multiple possible matches. Golden rule. Remember this simple phrase, AND means all, OR means any. If you remember that, you'll always know which operator to use. Congratulations! You've successfully completed Lesson 8 of our SQL Server course. In this lesson, you learned one of the most important concepts in SQL, filtering data using the where clause. We began by understanding why filtering is necessary when working with large tables containing thousands or even millions of records. Then we learned how the where clause helps us retrieve only the rows that match a specific condition. After that, we explored the most commonly used comparison operators, including equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. We also learned how to combine multiple conditions using the AND operator, where every condition must be true. Then we studied the OR operator, where satisfying just one condition is enough to return a row. Finally, we compared and or so that you know exactly when to use each one in your SQL queries. These concepts are used every day by SQL developers, database administrators, data analysts, and software engineers. So don't just watch the lesson. Open SQL Server and practice every query you've learned today. The more you practice, the more naturally SQL will become part of your thinking. If you found this lesson helpful, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others who are learning SQL, and subscribe to JeyB Tech Academy for more beginner-friendly SQL Server lessons. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications, so you'll be the first to know when our next lesson is published. In the next lesson, we'll continue building our SQL skills with more practical queries and real-world examples that you'll use in everyday development. Thank you for watching. Keep learning, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Closing message. Every SQL query starts with a question. Great SQL developers know how to ask the right question and write the right query. See you in Lesson 9.